Hello there, Year 5, it's Mrs. Flavel here. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be learning lots in school. We are so glad to have you all back in school, safe and well. We're going to be doing lots of work on geography and science and literacy and numeracy. We only got a few weeks in school until Easter, but we're going to get lots of lovely stuff in. We're really proud of how hard you've been working at home as well. We were so glad to see so many of you that signed in and were working online. So thank you very much for doing that. And let's take a look at some of the things you're going to be learning.
In literacy, we're working on our second unit, Bling. This is a fantastic unit where you get to write a modern retelling of a myth, focusing on the idea of a dilemma. A dilemma is a problem that is not easy to solve. An important decision must be made. To explore this idea, you will be writing a diary extract about your dilemma. As you're writing diary extracts, it's important we remember some of the features of how to write a diary. We use a diary start, which starts with a date and Dear Diary. We use colloquial, informal language. It should be in chronological order, using adverbials. It should be in past tense because you're telling us something that has already happened. Remember, it's your diary, so it should also be in first person. And it should include lots of thoughts, feelings, and opinions, with wonderful description to make it interesting writing too. Our grammar focus for this unit is to use relative clauses. Can you remember what a clause is? Let's take a closer look at main, subordinate and relative clauses to revise. A main clause is also known as an independent clause. It must contain a subject who's doing an action and a verb, a doing or being word. A subordinate clause is a dependent clause. It only makes sense when used with a main clause. Whenever you use a subordinate clause, you should use a subordinate conjunction in front of the subject and verb. Here are some examples of subordinate conjunctions. I bet you use these all the time anyway, and now you know what they're called. If your sentence starts with the subordinate clause at the front of the main clause, it must always have a comma after the subordinate clause, like in this example seen here. However, if the subordinate clause is after the main clause, it usually doesn't need a comma, like this example. A relative clause is slightly different. It must begin with a relative pronoun. These are which, that, when, where, whose, that, or who. And as we said, you will be writing a diary extract about your dilemma. So common features of a diary must be seen. For example, they'd start with Dear Diary and include the date or the time. Because it's a diary, it also needs to be written in first person. So you'd use the words I or as or my, personal pronouns. Have a look at these examples for first person and an example of how you wouldn't write. And of course, diaries tell us about the events that have already happened, so should always be written in past tense. Look at these examples to help you out with that.
In maths, we will be working on subtraction and then moving on to multiplication over this half term. We're going to focus on the vocabulary, written methods, and then applying these to solve problems. The four number operations are really important before moving on to any other parts of maths. We will also be practicing our times tables lots. Don't forget, times tables rock stars. You can always log into these, and you've all now got your logons to take at home and in school to do that. If you look to the left of this slide, we have got some of the vocabulary that we use to do with subtraction and multiplication. If you look at the two calculations here, these are based on our Wren's Nest maths policy and the way that we work our way up to do our calculations. So when we perform a subtraction such as 76 and we are subtracting 34 from it, we set it out in column method like this. First of all, we do the 6, we subtract the 4, which leaves us 2 ones, and then we do 7 tens, subtract the 3 tens, which leaves us 4 tens, and our answer ends up as 42. Then we move on to slightly more difficult ones, where we've got 543, subtract 156. Now this one might involve some borrowing and exchanges. For example, the first one, we have got 3. We cannot subtract 6 from 3. We have to go to our tens to borrow a 10. So we borrow a 10, that leaves 3 tens behind. We exchange that 10 to our ones column. 13 subtract 6 leaves us with 7. Then we have 3 subtract 5. Once again, 3 tens, we can't subtract 5 tens from 3. We've got to borrow and exchange from our hundreds. Leaves us with 400. We borrow the 100. We exchange the 100 over, sorry. And 13 subtract 5 leaves us with 8 tens. And then finally, 400 subtract 100 leaves us with 300. Our final answer being 387. When performing multiplication, we perform it in pretty much the same way. And again, here are two examples of the Wren's Nest pathways policy and the way that we perform multiplication. So when performing column addition multiplication, we put our larger number on the top and the number that we are multiplying it by underneath and in our ones. So first of all, we multiply our ones column. So 5 multiplied by 4 is 20. 20 is 0 ones and 2 tens which we carry over. 4 tens multiplied by 4, well, 4 fours are 16. And our 2 tens that we carry on is 18. Our final total is 180. Our second one is where we are multiplying by tens and ones. This is where we call it long multiplication. So we have 543, we're multiplying it by 25. First of all, we have our tens. If we're multiplying our tens, when we multiply 10, we put in a 0 placeholder here. 2 threes, which are 6, 2 fours, which are 8, and 2 fives, which are 10, which is our, when we've multiplied by our tens, we then go to our ones. We go 5 threes, 15, 5 in, carry our 1 10 over, 5 times 4, which is 20, plus the 1 is 21, and then we go to 5 times 5, which is 25, and the 2 that we've carried over makes 27. Once we have done this, we need to add together our two totals. We have got 5, we've got 7, we've got 8 plus 7, which is 15, 5 in, carry our 1 again, 2 plus 1 is 3, and finally our 10,000 there, we end up with 13,575. Sometimes when we are multiplying numbers, we need a quick way of working them out. So, for example, we've got 354, we're multiplying it by 5, and together we are going to group or chunk together to be able to work it out. So 4 times 5, which is 20. We have 5 times 5, which is actually 5 lots of 50. So 5 times is 25, which makes 250 because our place value here is tens. And then we go to our hundreds here. So 5 lots of 100, 300, 5 300, so 5 threes are 15. We're multiplying it by 100. So that's the past part. We then add together our final totals. So we have 1,500, 1,750 plus the 20 is 1,770. Whilst we're being geographers over this half term, we'll be starting our unit on map skills. We'll be learning to use an index and a contents page of an atlas and understand that there are lots of different types of maps representing different features. We'll also look at our local area and collate a range of information that we will use to create our own maps and keys. So we need to be thinking about when we use maps, where we use maps, and why we might be using maps. Physical maps are used to show natural features of the land. These things can be including mountains, rivers, lakes, forests, and you can see them by the different colours that are represented on the maps. Mountains are represented by the brown areas, forests obviously by the green areas, and if you look closely enough, some of the rivers and the lakes are blue areas that are marked on the map. Climate maps are maps that we use to find out the climate in different parts of the country. Now the climate is to do with the weather and the temperature. So we find out the average temperatures and rainfall over different areas in the country. As you can see in here, we've got nice and warm area right the way down in Cornwall, all the way up to where it gets a lot colder up in the top of Scotland. Political maps are used to show the different political beliefs in different parts of a country, taken from voting statistics. That is, when people vote, what they vote is taken into account and logged in different areas of the country. So the different colours in the areas of the country on this map are to do with how people have voted during the last election. Road maps show us the different routes that can be taken by road. These link different towns and cities and are important for transport. These are the type of maps that you normally see in a road atlas map that quite often you might see in your mum's, dad's, nan's, aunt's or uncle's car. The 8 points of a compass help us to navigate maps and can be used in orienteering activities. They're especially used in ordnance survey maps. So our 8 points are north, northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west and northwest.
In science, we're starting our unit on living things and their habitats. This is a bit different to what you may have done in younger years because we're looking closely at life cycles, reproduction, and what different species need to survive. We'll use a variety of sources, internet, video clips, posters, even some shows that you may find familiar. Do you recognise any of these famous people? We will be looking closely at some of these and finding out more about the important work they do in nature, looking closely at the behaviour of different types of animals. And of course, we'll be looking at life cycles, comparing life cycles of amphibians, insects, mammals, birds, and taking notes of the differences and the similarities between them. So that covers the main learning that will be happening in Year 5 up until the Easter holidays. As always, remember we are always here if you have any questions or concerns.
We are really looking forward to learning together.
See you soon, Mrs.
Bastable
Bastable.
and Miss Flavel.
Bye.